Good afternoon. This is Mr. Kowalczyk again, and we are now having our second video for business math. Today's video is all about section 1-2. But before we really jump into this, let me explain a few things about the chapter 1 that we're going to be covering in business math. Chapter 1 is all about the various types of money that you can earn from a job. You see, with the last video, 1-1, we talked about straight time pay. Straight time pay is an amount of money that you can earn from a job based on the number of hours you work. And it's usually based on an hourly rate. How much money do you make per hour at your job? You do the math, you figure out how much money you make each week. That's straight time pay. We are, of course, going to talk about commission and salary as we go through chapter 1. But today, with video on section 1-2, we're going to be talking about overtime. So, what is overtime? Overtime is money that you earn from a job for working extra hours. You see, most people normally only work 40 hours a week at the most. If they go over that 40 hours, then they're going to earn 8 overtime hours, or 9 overtime hours, or 10 overtime hours worth of pay. Today, in our problem, we're going to be looking at a person who works 8 overtime hours, and we're going to figure out how much money they earned. Because the cool thing about overtime is you earn extra money on top of what you would normally make. Now, as we look at these formulas, what we are going to see is that step 1 is identical to the step that we used for section 1-1. It's all about straight time pay. Hourly rate times hours worked equals straight time pay. So that one's pretty familiar. The second step is new, and this is how we calculate overtime pay. Now, in order to calculate overtime pay, you first need to know the type of overtime. Is it 1.5 or 2? Well, how do you figure this out? You read the problem. In the problem, there's going to be some key words that you need to look for. One key word could be double. If the company that you are working at pays double overtime, that means you get twice as much overtime pay for your overtime hours. For example, if you work at a movie theater and you make $10 an hour, but for overtime you get paid double, that means your overtime hour is going to be $20 an hour. Time and a half is for 1.5. If you get paid time and a half for overtime, that means you're getting paid 1.5 times the amount of your normal pay. Once again, if you're working at a movie theater that pays $10 an hour for regular hours, but you work overtime, you'll make $15 an hour. So you need to know the type of overtime, and once again, you can read that in the problem. Next, we have hourly rate. Hourly rate is the next thing you need to know in order to find overtime pay. So if you know the hourly rate, and that's how much you make per hour regularly, you plug that in here. And then the other thing you need is overtime hours worked. How many hours did you work for overtime this week? You multiply all 3 of these things out, and you can find the overtime pay. The third and final step for today's assignment is step 3, and that helps us to find the total pay. You see, total pay is the total amount of money you make each week. You first have to figure out the straight time pay. By the way, that's step 1. You then have to figure out the overtime pay, and that's step 2. After you've done step 1 and step 2, you just take those 2 answers from those steps, add them up, and you get the total pay. I know I kind of went through this kind of quickly, so let's actually look at the problem. Let's actually look at the problem and work it out. So, Stephen Kellogg is a machine operator, and he works at an hourly rate of $10.60. He earns time and a half for any overtime hours. So he doesn't get double, he gets time and a half. That's what he gets. Okay? Last week, he worked 40 regular hours. And he also had 8 overtime hours. Now, as I was reading this, you probably saw me using some colored underlines to kind of mark up this paragraph. Why? Well, it's because we're going to be using all of this info from this problem to do this. So now that we've got it all kind of read out, we've got it all kind of marked up, let's start using the formulas and trying to answer this problem. We'll move on to letter A. Letter A says, what was his regular pay for the week? What was Stephen's regular pay for the week? Well, to find regular pay, what we're talking about is straight time pay. Regular pay and straight time pay are pretty much the same thing. So we need to know for straight time pay his hourly rate. And if we look up at the top in our little paragraph, we see that underlined in red, his hourly rate is $10.60 per hour. What we're going to now do, of course, is multiply. We're going to multiply that times the hours worked. And when we're talking about hours worked, we're talking about 40 regular hours. Now, you don't have to write in the words regular hours, but you have to at least write 1060 times 40 to get full credit. As a reminder, in my class, you must show your work to get full points and write the answer properly on the lines that are provided. Now, as we use our calculators to multiply this out, we find that Stephen earns $424. But once again, write it on the line that is provided. I need to scoot that up a little bit. Take a moment, look at that. If you need to, you can always move back in the video to kind of see how we did that, but hopefully you're all able to see that we are getting this information from the paragraph above. None of this is a surprise. We get it from the paragraph above, as you can see with my lines. Let's move on to letter B. Letter B, they're asking for Stephen's overtime pay. In order to find his overtime pay, we are going to have to use step 2. Well, with step 2, we need to know right off the bat, what type of overtime is Stephen having? Well, it says in the paragraph in green that he earns time and a half. So for time and a half, we're going to write in the number 1.5. We get that from that little kind of a cream beige colored box up in the formulas, and there's even a green circle inside that box around time and a half, which means 1.5. So I got 1.5 written down. I now have to put in the multiplication sign, and I put in the hourly rate. We've already found the hourly rate because we used that for step 1. So I'm going to plug that $10.60 in again. I now can move on to overtime hours worked. Overtime hours worked is marked with a purple underline. So I'm going to put down 8 overtime hours. You don't have to put the words down. I'm just doing that because it's easier for me. So there's my formula. I've set this up. I'm getting my points by showing my work, but now I need to multiply it out and get the correct answer to get the full points. And what I get is 127.2. I mean, that's a nice number and all, but in business math class, we're working with money. We're working with dollars. You need to be sure that when you write it out on the final line for your final answer, that you make it look like money. I got the dollar sign in there. I had to add the 0 after the 2. Now it looks perfect. This now leaves us with our third and final part of this problem. What was Stephen's total pay? Well, we have to use step 3. For step 3, what we are going to do, of course, is add things up. We're going to have to add the 424 from letter A plus the 127.20 from letter B. If we are able to add those up correctly, we will find, once again, our answer being 551.2. Got to write the answer nice and neatly on the line that's provided. And that should get you through problem 1 on your worksheet. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to come and talk to Mr. K. He wants to help you out. And feel free to rewatch this video as many times as is needed, and hopefully you will get this problem correct along with all the other problems on today's assignment. Thank you.